Greetings, citizens. Hey you beautiful, creepy little human being, you. Welcome to my channel and welcome to today's Morbid makeup video. I'm so happy we could meet like this. I'm so happy that somehow in all of this craziness today, you and I were able to find each other on this crazy little planet that we call home. My name is Brittany or BRATTERSTEIN, whichever you prefer, and today we're going to be discussing a man named Bruce Pardo. Now, Bruce Pardo dressed up as Santa Claus on Christmas Eve and then headed over to a Christmas Eve party. Seems totally normal, right? Except for that it wasn't. Once Bruce arrived at the party, he rained hell down on this unsuspecting family, killing 9 people and injuring several others before taking his own life. Yeah, this is a really crazy one. But before we get started, if you have not yet had the pleasure, please make sure to join the Brat Pack by subscribing and ringing that bell. I put out a new Morbid makeup video every single week, sometimes 2 a week, and I would love to hang out with you. Yes, you specifically, you, but I can only do that if you join the Brat Pack and become one of us. One of us. One of us. One of us. And you can also follow me on Instagram and Twitter if you want. They're both BRATTERSTEIN, but no pressure. So guess what, guys? Today's video is sponsored by Dossier. And now if you've never been here before, you might not know who Dossier is, so let me tell you who Dossier is. Dossier is a fragrance company that makes luxury scents at a fraction of luxury prices, where you can get a typical bottle of luxury perfume from anywhere from $50 to hundreds of dollars, and I can attest to this because the one that I was using prior to Dossier cost me $80. Dossier perfumes cost anywhere from $29 to $49, and they offer you bulk deals where if you buy like 3 or more bottles, you get 25% off, and I think they're having sales for the holidays also. It's a really good thing, and they also have deals where you can get free shipping. Today I have the scent Oriental Oak Moss, which is inspired by the Chanel Coco Mademoiselle perfume. And I got this one, which is Citrus Green Apple, and it is inspired by Dolce & Gabbana's Light Blue. And I can get these 2 bottles of perfume that smell so good, by the way, for less than the price of one of those perfumes that I mentioned before, either the Chanel or the Dolce & Gabbana. Those both cost more than these do together. Isn't that crazy? I don't understand how they do it. Is Dossier doing witchcraft? 2021 witchcraft? Oh, and something else that's very important to me is that neither Chanel nor Dolce & Gabbana are cruelty-free perfume companies, but Dossier is. They're cruelty-free, and that's very important to me personally. Anyways, Dossier is offering members of the Brat Pack 10% off their purchase of their new favorite perfume with the code BRATTERSTEIN at checkout. You can get the link down below in my description box, and I think it's a good thing. One, because it's Christmas time, so gifts. Smelling good is a great gift, because smelling good is living good, because you want hugs, right? It's Christmas. It's holidays season, whatever. And you want to give hugs, and no one wants to hug a smelly person, right? Right. So of course, don't forget to use the link down below and use BRATTERSTEIN at checkout to save 10% off of your new favorite perfume. And now I just want to thank Dossier for continuing to want to work with me and hanging out on my channel, because I think that is super tight. I really like the company, so I'm glad that we can continue to work together. And of course, I want to thank you for always being so stoked and supportive of everything I do, because you're cool as fuck. Okay. All right, now that I'm done spreading the good word of Dossier, we can get into this video. Now, this case is so crazy, man. There's something about this case, something about the total devastation of what this man brought upon this family blows my mind and gives me chills. He literally went in a home and murdered an entire family and just traumatized anyone who managed to escape his reign of terror, and to just go in on Christmas Eve with a gun and a flamethrower. It's a lot of information. With that said, I'm going to tell you all about it. I'm going to give you the whole story, and while I do, I'm going to be putting on a full face of makeup, hence the makeup and morbid makeup. Now, if that's not really your thing, thanks for stopping by. I hope you find a channel that delivers the information to you in a way that you enjoy. But if you're kind of on the fence, you're not sure how you feel, maybe stick around. You might be surprised by how much you like it. Okay. With all of that said, come gather around and let me tell you the story of Bruce Pardo, the killer Santa Claus. On December 24th, 2008, Joseph and Alicia Ortega decided that they wanted to have a Christmas party. Well, they didn't decide they wanted to have a Christmas party on that night, but they were throwing a Christmas party that evening, and they invited all of their adult children. They had 5 kids, and they invited all of their families, their grandkids. They invited over the whole group to come over to their Covina home, which is about 40 minutes to an hour away from Los Angeles. Joseph and Alicia loved Christmas. They were older at this point, they were retired. They just liked to have people in their home, to have it filled with life and love and family again. So they invited all their kids, and they also invited some friends over so that they could have a holiday party. That Christmas Eve, everybody was having a good time. The family and the partygoers. The partygoers were all having a good time. They were playing card games. They were spending time together. They were just enjoying each other's company. And it was a good party. It was in full swing. That was until the doorbell rang. And once that door opened, all hell broke loose. Shortly after the doorbell rang, phone calls started coming in to 911 from the Ortega's neighbors. And one of the callers said, and I quote, "Come immediately. They're burning down someone's house." Plenty of other calls ended up coming into police that night, some reporting the fire and some reporting hearing gunshots coming from inside the Ortega home. It was just absolutely insane. The fire department was dispatched to the home, of course, and when they got there, they found that the fire was absolutely out of control, and it took firefighters several hours to get the fire under control. And once they finally did, they found a scene of just absolute craziness in the home, and all of the victims who had been killed in that home had to be identified by their dental records because all of them were just unrecognizable due to the extent of the fire. One lieutenant said of the scene that he walked upon, and I quote, "When I arrived, to describe it as apocalyptic would be accurate." When police started to put together what happened, they were totally shocked because they learned that someone had come to the Ortega home during the party, dressed up as Santa Claus, and just started opening fire on the entire family. So, while police are investigating the massacre at the Ortega home, additional officers receive a call that dispatched them to a home in Sylmar, California, which is incidentally where I am going after I'm done doing this face. Weird. Anyways, they receive a call from a man named Brad Pardo. And Brad, sadly, had been out that evening, had come home and discovered his brother, Bruce Pardo, dead of what looked like a self-inflicted pregnancy brain. Brad found his brother, Bruce, dead in a pool of his own blood from what looked like a self-inflicted gunshot wound. Once officers arrived, they found that Bruce had been killed by a single shot to the head from a 9mm handgun. There was a 9mm pistol in Bruce's lap, and there was a second 9mm pistol on the floor. Police also found another bullet hole in the ceiling, and they believed, at least at first, that there may have been a second shooter at the scene. But this was found quickly not to be the case. So, the suicide of Bruce Pardo initially was not connected by investigators to the Ortega family massacre because they were in different cities. They didn't realize who he was at the time and who the family was at the time, so they really did not put two and two together. But once they started looking into Bruce, looking into his background, looking into who he actually was, the picture started to come into focus and things became very clear. Police found in looking into Bruce's background that he was recently divorced, like very, very recently. He had a wife, a woman named Sylvia Ortega, and their divorce had just been finalized on December 18th, so just less than a week before the massacre. And when they looked into her further, they found that her birth name was Ortega. So she was one of the members of the family who was murdered in the massacre. So that is starting to make investigators kind of be like, oh shit, like this makes a lot of sense. Now, who was Bruce Pardo? Bruce Jeffrey Pardo grew up in the San Fernando Valley in Los Angeles, California, a place that I know pretty well. He graduated from John H. Polytechnic High School and went on to study computer science at California State Northridge. He did well in school, particularly in math, and was known as being a friendly and bubbly guy, a goofy guy, a guy who was known for wanting to be the center of attention. After Bruce graduated from high school, which by the way, during his high school graduation, he brought a blow-up doll to the graduation because, as I said, he wanted to be the center of attention, which is just like a choice. But anyways, after his sex doll graduation, he went on to get a job at the Jet Propulsion Laboratory. The Jet Propulsion Laboratory, or as Kathleen Light says, laboratory. Anyways, he got this job, which is a pretty good job. I'm like 99% sure that a friend of mine actually used to work there. Because isn't it connected with NASA? I could be completely wrong, but if it's what I think it is, my friend worked there. And it was a good job, but Bruce did not do very well at this job. He was kind of a slacker, and he used his time, instead of doing his job, to hack into the company's like system and steal his fellow employees' personal information. Because, you know, that's just what you do. That's just what you do when you're Bruce Pardo, I guess. I don't know about you guys, but I guess that's what you do. Is that what you do? That's not what I do. I don't know. So though Bruce didn't do well at this job, it wasn't his strong suit, obviously, because he just liked to like steal people's information or whatever. It did serve to be useful for his social life, because he met a woman at the age of 24 that he just fell madly in love with. He was like, oh, I'm all about you, girl. Let's get married. And her name was Delilah. Hey there, Delilah. What's it like? The Jet Propulsion Laboratory. No, her name was Delia, and he met her and he was like all about it, but he wasn't doing very well financially, probably because he wasn't like keeping a job, because he was, instead of working, stealing people's information. So Delia, being an actual earth angel, was like, baby, I love you too, don't worry. I have some dollars and I'm going to use these dollars on our wedding, so don't you even worry. So she agreed to fund the whole wedding, and it wasn't like it was going to be a cheap wedding. It was going to be at a country club, which is notoriously expensive. Like, I've heard of these weddings, and my God, what, she must have come from money, I imagine. Or she was self-made, or she did, I don't know. I don't know how she had this money, but she did, and she said she was going to pay for the whole wedding and take them on a honeymoon to Tahiti. Bruce Pardo was literally going to be a sugar baby. Like, that's amazing. How do I go about becoming a sugar baby without having to not be with my husband? Is this a thing? I don't think this is a thing. The wedding took place in June of 1989, and Delia anxiously awaited the beginning of her wedding. The ceremony, the place where the ceremony was held, was filled with 250 of the couple's closest friends and family, and she waited there nervously, and she waited. And she waited. And she waited. And Bruce never showed up. He straight up dipped. He ditched her. He left her at the altar. Well, I guess that wouldn't be the same as like a guy being left at the altar, because she was probably like waiting in the back and he just like never showed up at the front. But can you imagine? Especially after all she was doing for him and for them. I was just like, girl. And you think that's bad? You think that's bad? You just wait. She found out later that not only did he not show up, he had gone into her bank account, he had stole the last 3,000 of her dollars that she had, and he had gone and took himself a little vacation in Palm Beach, Florida, without her. And the worst my husband does is not pick up his socks from the floor. And that makes me crazy. I can't. My brain can't. I'm mad for her. How dare you, Bruce? How dare you? I truly cannot imagine, and as I'm sure you can imagine, Delia quickly called off the wedding, kicked this guy to the curb, this absolute loser, and said of him, and I quote, whatever he felt like, he did. There was no sense of responsibility. So the next relationship that Bruce Pardo found himself in was longer and actually better, but it didn't end up in a much better place than the first one. By 2001, he and his then girlfriend were living together in Calabasas, California. They were doing really well. They were happy. Everything was cool. They even had a 13-month-old son together, and everything seemed to be going really, really well for the couple. That was until one day when Bruce was left alone with his baby son, Matthew, while his girlfriend went out to run an errand or something. She wasn't gone very long, but her absence would prove to be detrimental. So while Bruce is watching his young baby son, he started watching TV, Bruce did, and got a little bit distracted, and he wasn't really paying attention to the baby. And that's when the baby somehow ventured out into the backyard and fell into the family pool. This baby was only 13 months old, so a year and 1 month. So the baby couldn't swim, and naturally, it didn't go well. Bruce ended up finding the baby, getting him out of the pool, freaked out. His girlfriend Elena came home, and the baby was quickly rushed to the hospital. And the baby was in the hospital for an entire week because he was really messed up. And Bruce was actually there the whole time the baby was in the hospital. But then the doctor came and gave the couple bad news. The doctor told Bruce and Elena that baby Matthew was never going to fully recover. The doctor told Bruce and Elena that baby Matthew had sustained serious brain damage and was now going to be a paraplegic for the rest of his life. Which is just, I can't even imagine getting that information, being that couple, getting that information, being Elena, learning that she left her son alone and this happened. I cannot even imagine. And then it gets worse. Do you know how Bruce decides to deal with the situation, to deal with this trauma? He dips, dude. He literally straight up leaves, abandons Elena, abandons his son, never sees them again, and never helps support the baby financially at all. I have nothing to say. I don't have words. I'm at a loss. That's a first. Congratulations, Bruce. I just can't with this guy. But anyway, let's just move on. Let's move on now to his next partner, the woman he'd end up marrying and then murdering, Sylvia. In 2004, Bruce Pardo had a job and he was talking to one of his coworkers. And I'm not sure how the subject got brought up, but this coworker was like, oh, I've got a woman that I would love you to meet. It was his sister-in-law named Sylvia. Sylvia was 40 years old and she was a mother of 3. She had been married twice before, and when she and Bruce met, the two really hit it off. They immediately connected and they dated for like 1 or 2 years before finally deciding to get married on January 29th, 2006. Bruce and Sylvia then went on to buy a home together, a large 3-bedroom home in Montrose, California, something big enough to hold their big old new family, because it was Bruce, it was Sylvia, it was her 3 kids, and they decided to get a puppy. They got a dog, a Akita that they named Saki. And by all accounts, this was a happy family. It was a happy union. Things were going really well for the couple. They were beacons in the community. They went to church often, and Bruce even volunteered as a deacon in the church. Like, he was heavily involved in the church. Excuse me, not a deacon. I just looked at my notes. It was an usher. I don't think you can volunteer to be a deacon. I know nothing of church. Sorry. Anyways, even though to the outside world the couple seemed to be doing very well, as is common, and we know sometimes things are not what they seem. And after buying the home together, the couple found that they were in a bit of a sticky spot financially. Things were a little bit tight right now. And in addition to just that, which is already the quickest thing in the world to make you and your partner fight, like money is the thing that makes people fight the easiest in the world, the country, statistically. Anyway, in addition to just having money troubles, Bruce refused to open a joint bank account with his wife. And I've heard that it's common for couples to do this, to open a joint account because you're married now, so put all the money in one place. But Bruce wouldn't do this. But his reason for not doing this, which is like fine if you want to keep your money separate, like do you. But the reason he didn't want to do this is because he wanted Sylvia to 100% only financially support her children. So even though they'd gotten married, so now it's their children, he's like, Nabi, those are your kids. You take care of them 100%. I'm not helping with that. So things were tense already because that is like not like, I mean, is it his money? Sure. But that's just like not what you expect when you marry somebody. I imagine you imagine that you're partners at this point. So she's already, I imagine, in a place where she's not happy. And then Bruce's mother, Nancy, who loved Sylvia's kids, was a big fan, was getting kind of fed up with her son's bullshit and mentioned to Sylvia all about Bruce's past relationships, including his ex and his son Matthew, who he did not see. Sylvia had no idea that Matthew existed, so let's start there. So she was shocked, as I'm sure you can imagine, because 1, she's learning that her husband has a kid, which is already shocking. 2, she's learning that he's a disabled child that he has not seen in years, that he just straight bailed on and was like, deuces, this isn't my problem anymore. And that's like super effed up. I don't know about you guys. I've told all of my friends this, that like if I was ever a single human being, a man not seeing his kids would be 100% a deal breaker for me. I wouldn't date somebody who did that and made that choice. And on top of that, oh my God, are you ready for this? She found out that though she had not seen Matthew since his injury, which was his fault, he was still claiming Matthew on his taxes as a dependent. How gross was this guy? The grossest. So Sylvia was like, well, fuck all this noise. And she separated from Bruce in March of 2008, like shortly after the two got married. And wait, right? Because didn't they get married that year in January? Let me go back on my notes here. Just kidding. They got married in January of 2006. So they were together a little bit of time before this happened. But either way, They separated. But at the time, Sylvia's daughter was in kindergarten and she had been at her school for a while, so she wanted to finish off the school year in the home with Bruce and then leave once that was done, right? But Bruce was like, this isn't going to work for me. So one day, while Sylvia had been out at her niece's birthday party, Bruce took all of her belongings, all of her kids' belongings, and threw them out in the driveway and was like, get the fuck out. So she came home to all of her shit all over the driveway because he's a dickhead. So at that point, Sylvia was like, well, fuck that, and effectively filed for divorce in April of 2008. And Bruce did not do well with this divorce. He was very unhappy that it was happening. He still wanted to be with Sylvia, and he fell into a deep, deep depression because of the divorce. And for him, when it rained, it poured. In June of that year, the couple went to divorce court and Bruce was ordered to pay $1,785 a month in spousal support to Sylvia, and he was not happy about it. He would tell anybody who would listen that his ex-wife was taking him to the cleaners. An officer from the Covina Sheriff's Department said of this court hearing, and I quote, "From what I understand, at that hearing, it became very contentious. It's possible he started planning this prior to last Thursday. Based on Thursday, which was the hearing day, it may have been the trigger." So after being ordered to pay spousal support, Bruce did write the first check, but that check bounced. And then on the second check, he put a stop payment so that Sylvia effectively never received any money and he never again attempted to make any payment. Shortly before the Christmas holiday, the spousal support actually ended up being waived by the court because at this point, Bruce no longer had a job. But even though he didn't have a job and he didn't have the money to pay his spousal support, that same month he bought his first 9mm gun. Oh, and speaking of him losing his job, he lost his job because his company found that he had been billing fraudulent hours to try to get more money. So he got fired, and then he was denied unemployment because he got fired for frauding the company. Over the following 2 months, both in August and September, Bruce went out and bought 2 more 9mm handguns. So he obviously had the money to buy all of these guns. He then contacted a neighbor of his, a neighbor named Jerry. I think this was a woman, but I'm not sure. A human being named Jerry. And Jerry actually owned a costume store. And Bruce reached out to Jerry and was like, hey, I would like to buy a Santa Claus costume, but I need it to be custom made with a little extra room for comfort. I need it to be a little big on me. So Jerry agreed to do this. Bruce paid Jerry a $200 deposit and claimed that he would bring the rest of the money in November and pick up the suit at that point. Following that, on October 11th, Bruce actually received a phone call from an old childhood friend, like an old high school friend, a man named Steve. And Steve lived in Iowa, but was inviting Bruce to Iowa to come to Steve's 45th birthday party. And Bruce was like, hell yeah, I will absolutely do that. And when he got there, he unloaded on Steve. Poor Steve. Steve was like, this is supposed to be my birthday party, guy. What are we talking about? Why are you so angry? Bruce told Steve that he was just pissed. His whole situation pissed him off. He was pissed off and embarrassed that his life was on display, that his finances were on display, and that him getting fired, everybody knew because of the court proceedings. He was also pissed that his own mother, Nancy, was on Sylvia's side. Apparently during the court proceedings, she would sit behind Sylvia, on her side, and completely did not support her own son because she knew that he was a loser. And this pissed Bruce off. And he really unloaded this on Steve and told him all of this stuff. And poor Steve was just I don't know how Steve reacted, but I imagine he was just fuck, that sucks. That's crazy. That's crazy. Then Bruce keeps talking. Steve's like, oh, that's crazy. And then he keeps talking. That same month, while he was over there visiting Steve, he bought his 4th handgun, another 9mm. And then he also picked up 16 magazines of bullets, each that held 18 bullets, which is 8 more bullets that are allowed, or at least at that time, I don't know a lot about guns, but at that time, that was 8 more bullets than were allowed to be purchased in magazines in California. So he took it upon himself to get illegal, magazines for his guns that he couldn't get in California while he was there, while he was out of state. So now it's November, and Bruce heads over to his friend Jerry's costume shop, and he picks up his custom-made Santa costume. He pays for it, and he even tips an additional $20 because thank you for the good job. He then went out and purchased yet another handgun, totaling 5, and then just swung by and casually picked up the items to build a homemade flamethrower. These items were an air compressor, a 50-foot hose, and a tank of high-octane gasoline. Or fuel. Fuel. Just 1 week before Christmas, on December 18th, 2008, Sylvia's divorce from Bruce was final. Bruce agreed to let Sylvia keep her diamond engagement ring and the couple's little puppy, but he got to keep the house, and he agreed to pay her a total of $10,000. Bruce was not happy about this. He said that Sylvia was living with her parents, not paying rent, and had spent lavishly on a luxury car, gambling trips to Las Vegas, meals at fine restaurants, massages, and golf lessons. How dare she? So he didn't feel like he should have to support her in this. But regardless, the ruling was the ruling, and this was less than a week before the massacre. On the evening of December 24th, Christmas Eve, Bruce had actually signed up to serve as an usher at his church, the church that he attended, but he never showed up that night to do that community service, I guess was what you would call it. He instead, that night at 11:30 p.m., got into his Santa Claus suit, grabbed a giant package, and headed to Covina, the home of his wife's parents, where his wife had been living, in a nice little cul-de-sac in a nice little area, a nice 2-story home. That's where he headed instead. So apparently, the Ortegas had this Christmas party every single year. It was something that they did often for their neighbors. It was something that the people in the neighborhood looked forward to. And generally, there was a neighbor who always showed up at this party dressed up as Santa Claus, but this particular year they were unable to. But because of this, when a man dressed up as Santa knocked on their door, this was not seen as unusual. Inside the home, the party was just starting to unwind. The guests were about to leave. People were gathering by the front door, putting on their jackets, saying their goodbyes, and that's when they heard the knock on the door. The door was answered by Sylvia's 8-year-old niece, Katrina, 8 years old. She, being 8, opened the door, saw Santa Claus, and got so excited, so she ran to him to give him a hug. It's just, oh my God, Santa Claus, right? This is when 45-year-old Bruce did not hesitate at all. He pulled out one of his guns and shot this 8-year-old girl right in her face. He then went on to just open fire, shooting at everyone he could see with no apparent goal. He wasn't looking for somebody specific. He just started opening fire, spraying bullets around that house. As you can imagine, people were panicked. People were running. People were trying to hide. They were trying to go under things. They were trying to get in other rooms. They were even trying to stop Bruce, but it was no use. He emptied all 4 of the high-powered semi-automatic handguns that he brought with him. As he went into the house, he began shooting at the partygoers indiscriminately. It appears that he did have some intended targets, those being the family members and immediate family of his ex-wife. After running out of ammunition for his guns, he then decided it was time to unwrap the gift he brought with him. Remember I said he was carrying a big present? Santa Claus carrying a big present when he opened the door. When he walked through the door and then shot an 8-year-old girl. Yeah, so once he ran out of bullets, he opened this present, and inside there was the homemade flamethrower. Bruce sprayed 18 gallons of gas into that home with the intention of lighting it on fire and leaving. But unbeknownst to Bruce, there were 2 fireplaces going off in the house, like firing in the house. And because of that, it caused an explosion, which Bruce was part of. 9 people were murdered in this house, either by gunshot or by succumbing to the fire or the smoke inhalation. Sylvia Ortega, Bruce's ex-wife, died from a gunshot wound at the age of 43. Alicia Ortega, Sylvia's mother, died from a gunshot wound to the abdomen at the age of 70. Joseph Ortega, Sylvia's father, died from multiple gunshot wounds at the age of 80, being the eldest of those murdered. Charles Ortega, who was Sylvia's brother, died from a combination of smoke inhalation and gunshot wounds at the age of 50. Sherry Ortega, Charles's wife, died from a combination of smoke inhalation and gunshot wounds at the age of 45. James Ortega, Sylvia's brother, died from a combination of smoke inhalation and gunshot wounds at the age of 52. Teresa Ortega, James's wife, died of a combination of smoke inhalation and gunshot wounds at the age of 51. Alicia Ortiz, Sylvia's sister, died from a combination of smoke inhalation and gunshot wounds at the age of 46. And last, Michael Ortiz, Alicia's son, died in the fire at the age of 17, being the youngest of those murdered. Man, it's just so tragic to list all of those family members out like that. Like that's so many people lost from one family in one day. It literally just like blows my mind. And this family, by all accounts, was like a good, loving family. Joseph and Alicia had worked for years. They owned their own business and they were finally retired. They were 80 and 70 years old. And they were just like having a slower life at this point. They were just relaxing, trying to take it slow, trying to enjoy the time they had left, spending time with their family. They had a little dog who I guess would always escape from the yard and have to be brought back, and they were known for that for the neighbors, but they wouldn't get mad about it. They were just like, oh, there's Joseph and Alicia. And every year they had this Christmas party so that they could get together with their family and their friends and just like enjoy the company. It's so fucked, man. To go that long, to make it that many years in life, and then to go out like that. So fucked up. A friend and neighbor of the Ortegas said of the family, and I quote, "They were a big and loving family. We usually exchanged gifts with them this day. They gave us tamales and cookies every Christmas." As a result of these 9 murders, 13 children were orphaned. And in addition to the 9 fatalities, 3 of the guests were also wounded. There was 8-year-old Katrina, who had been shot in the face as soon as she opened the door to let Bruce in. Her injuries were severe, obviously, but she somehow managed to survive. A 16-year-old girl who had been present at the party was shot in the back, and she was wounded, but she did survive. And then another girl, a 20-year-old woman, had broken her ankle from jumping from a second-story window to escape the fire and the gunshots. One of the only members of the Ortega family to survive was Sylvia's sister, Leticia. She was also the mother of 8-year-old Katrina, who was shot in the face. Well, during the ordeal, she, her husband, and her daughter were able to escape miraculously, and they ran to the neighbors and called 911. "I need someone to come over and help my daughter. She's been shot in the side of the face." She then went on to describe the attacker, the shooter, to police. "His name is Bruce Pardo. He's still shooting out there. Please, I don't know who else is alive." Katrina was in bad shape, as I said, and spoiler alert, I had already said this, but she did end up surviving, thank God. 8 years old! Can you even imagine the hell of something like that? Being her and being her mother, you're at a family gathering with your entire family. Everyone's getting shot. Your daughter is shot in the face. It's just like too much mentally. It really is. So once Bruce was done, once the explosion happened, he actually didn't die in the house. He was able to escape the explosion, and he ran to the car that he had brought with him that was parked nearby. And when he got there, he had to peel the Santa suit off his body because, you see, he had not expected the explosion. He wasn't intending for that to happen. He wasn't intending to be in there. And the suit had melted to his body, causing him 3rd-degree burns. That was not part of the plan for Bruce. So he then gets in the car and he makes the drive back to his brother's home in Sylmar, which is about a 30-mile drive, something around that range of distance. And when he got to his brother's house, he actually he had taken off the Santa suit and he put it in the car. And because he was smart, remember, he worked for Jet Propulsion Laboratory. Like, he had a brain on him. He was just a fucking loser. And he set up the suit to explode if anyone was to move it. And there was 200 rounds of ammunition in the car. The Covina police chief said of Bruce and the bomb that he rigged, and I quote, "This guy was sharp. He had the expertise and motivation to build a device that he could use for mass destruction." Bruce's brother returned that night home from a Christmas party that he had gone to too, and he returned home at about 3:10 a.m. And that's when he found his brother dead, sprawled out on his couch. He had put the 9mm pistol in his mouth and had shot himself in the head. And when he killed himself, he was still wearing his wedding ring. Bruce's brother said of the crime, and I quote, "We never saw this coming. We never thought this would ever happen." Bruce's brother and his wife had planned to write letters of condolences to Sylvia's family that was still remaining, but I have no idea if they ever actually did that. They just said that they planned to. A reporter said of these murders, and I quote, "The divorce shattered Bruce Pardo. It became his obsession, and Bruce began to plot ways to get back at Sylvia. I think that he decided that he wasn't going to just kill her, but he was going to kill everything that she loved and take it and wipe it off the face of the earth." The following day, so Christmas Day, police were able to finally speak with Sylvia's sister that survived, Letitia, and she informed the police that though he was wearing the suit and the beard and everything, she knew who the shooter was, and it was her sister's ex-husband, Bruce Pardo. The police then ended up going over to Bruce's brother Brad's house where Bruce had killed himself, and that's when they found him there dead, and they also found the car that, as I stated, was rigged to explode with a bunch of rounds of ammunition when the trigger was the Santa suit. And the car that this was in, the car that was located and had the bomb in it, was actually a car that the Ortega's neighbors had reported seeing near the home at the time of the murders. When police tried to actually deactivate the bomb in the car, it actually ended up erupting into flames. Like, it went off on its own, and police then had to evacuate all the houses in the area to make sure nobody else got hurt, and nobody else did, fortunately. Like, his plan to take out a bunch of other people along with Sylvia's family was not successful, thankfully. Once Bruce's autopsy was finally completed, that's when police were able to determine that it wasn't actually two shooters, because remember in the beginning I said that they thought because there was a bullet hole in the ceiling and he was dead that maybe there was a second shooter, but no, I think the first one was like a test fire, and the second one was him taking his own life. They were also able to determine through autopsy that his burns were bad. He had third-degree burns on his arms and on his legs, and the Santa suit had melted into his thighs, and in addition to that, they found cocaine in his system. Police do not believe that Bruce Pardo, and I also don't believe that Bruce Pardo initially planned to kill himself for a couple of reasons. The first one was that he didn't leave a note, and it's common for people to do so. But in addition to that, when police found his body and they, took him in, he was dead and everything, they found that there was $17,000 that was like attached to his body under his clothes with saran wrap, which you would not need if you were going to just kill yourself. Am I right? Additionally, it was thought that Bruce had planned to run to Iowa by plane, as he had actually bought an airline ticket for a flight leaving from Los Angeles on December 25th. Bruce had called days before this to let his friend who lived in Iowa, Steve, know that he planned to go visit him again. But police are unsure if he was actually planning to go or if this purchase and this phone call was just made to throw investigators off while he ran to Mexico. And the reason they thought Mexico specifically and that he was going to run and that this plane ticket was a decoy is that they found another reason that they think he didn't initially plan to kill himself okay, this is getting a little confusing, but let me fix it a little bit. While they were investigating Bruce and figuring out what was going on, they received a call, police did, from a man reporting a mysterious car parked in front of his home in Pasadena. Okay, now this is a different car than the one that was rigged to explode with the Santa suit. Stay with me, please stay with me. Police go to Pasadena and they look in this car and they run the plates and they find that this car is also registered to Bruce right now. So it appears that Bruce Pardo rented two cars from two different rental car companies. They were a Dodge Caliber and a RAV4. I'm not exactly sure why he chose to rent two cars, maybe so one could blow up and then the other one he could run off with. But this car was seen as being a getaway car because there was nothing in it set up to explode or anything, and instead it was filled with things that one might need if they were going to go on the run from the police. It was packed with supplies including a computer, clothes, food, water, and maps of both the US and Mexico. So with this insight, police were thinking that it's likely that the first car that was rigged to explode was just a decoy to distract the police while he escaped in the second car to Mexico. And I actually do kind of believe that this is true. It reminds me a lot of that fucking guy. The Aurora, Colorado guy who shot up the movie theater. I don't know if you remember that when The Dark Knight was released, there was the guy in Aurora, Colorado who went and shot up the movie theater. But when he went to do that, he had set up his apartment to blow up so that all the cops would be on that side of town handling his apartment while he was there killing as many people as possible. But his was unsuccessful also. What was that guy's name? It doesn't matter. Fucking loser. That's what his name was. Anyways. Another thing about this getaway car. This getaway car was actually parked just down the street from a man named Scott Nord, his home. And this man was Sylvia's divorce attorney. So police also think that it's possible that he was going to murder Scott as well. Oh, and it came out that police also believed that Bruce was planning to kill his own mother, his mother Nancy, because of her support for Sylvia during the whole divorce proceedings and everything. And he felt like it was sort of like she was a fucking traitor, right? So he planned to kill her as well. And that's just absolutely crazy to me that he was going to kill his own mom. But Nancy like loved Sylvia, and she was on Sylvia's side. She loved Sylvia. She loved Sylvia's kids. And even after all of this happened, she was like, listen, anything that I get from Bruce, anything from his house, any money, anything that comes from his death is going right to my grandchildren because I love my grandchildren and it all belongs to them. Fuck. And they just lost their mother, you know? And she said that like every grandparent says that they have the best grandchildren, but that when she says it, it's actually true. And they weren't even her blood. I fucking love her. I love Nancy. I don't know Nancy, but from what I've read, I love Nancy. So the theory here on why Bruce ended up killing himself as opposed to just running is because his plan went completely, like things went off the rails. Things did not go as planned for him. Like he did not intend for that explosion to happen. When he went in there with his fucking flamethrower, he was expecting to just be able to light the place on fire, peace out, leave, go wherever he was going to go and be in the wind. But that's not how it went. When the explosion happened, he got fucked up, right? He got 3rd-degree burns all over his body. The suit was melted into his legs. He had to like peel it off. And 3rd-degree burns are no joke. He wasn't going to be able to just drive off into the distance and be fine. He needed like medical attention. And what's he going to do? Like go to a hospital right now and have to explain how this happened? He'd get caught. So instead it's like he just decided to say fuck it, take the L and like end it all. Bruce's neighbors said of this decision, and I quote, "I still wonder if the suit hadn't lit, how the story would have ended. It may have been a much different ending." And you know, I do think that that's a good point. I think it's a good point, and I think it's a good quote. I think it's a worthwhile quote because I think it's correct. I think that Bruce intended to just kill everyone there that night, as many people as possible, and I believe he intended to take out anyone that he perceived as being responsible for ruining his life and making him in the situation that he was in at that time. Though it does appear to me that Bruce is doing a pretty good job at ruining his own fucking life, and things just ended up going really, really wrong or really right for Bruce, depending on how you look at it. And here we are. That's it. That's it with that quote. That is the end of the story. That is the story of Bruce Pardo, the killer Santa Claus. And isn't that just so intense? Like, what do you think? Everything about it is just so insane to me. The sheer, like we talk about a lot of crazy stories here, obviously, but the sheer devastation that this man caused, the number of bodies, the way he went about doing this, the dramatics of the Santa outfit and everything, I can't even imagine being there and how horrifying that must have been. And then I think about being one of the family members who survived and the trauma of something like that, of being the survivor's guilt of your whole family being massacred on Christmas Eve. Like in a 2016 interview with Oprah, Letitia, who is Sylvia's sister and 8-year-old Katrina's mother, said, and I quote, "I can't do anything to change what happened. I can only focus on the future. This is what he's done. Enough. I'm not going to allow you to continue to consume us with your evilness. You don't want that anger to live with you day to day and grow, just like it did with that monster." So it does appear that she's trying to stay positive and not let this tragedy ruin her life, but I'll never understand. I will never understand how it seems completely impossible to me. I'm often surprised how victims of crimes like this are able to compartmentalize what happened to them and put it aside and move on with their lives, because I just don't think I could. Maybe I'm weak, but I don't think I'd be capable of doing that. It just doesn't seem possible. But anyways, guys, that completes this video. I hope you found it interesting and informative, and it gave you all the information you would want when looking into this case. And of course, thank you for remembering the Ortega family with me today. What happened to them is just so horrible and so unimaginable, and I can't even fathom how horrifying of a situation that would be to be in. To be there and have someone come in and start shooting up your entire family, the people that you are closest with in the world, and having to sit there and watch them die and not be able to protect them and not know what's going to happen to you and be trying to hide, and then have the fire, and then for the people who didn't die simply by gunshot wound, it's too much. But anyways, guys, please let me know of any cases you would like to see me cover in the future down below. As you know, I have a long list of cases, but every time you leave a suggestion, I put it on the list with your name next to it so I can give you a shout out, because I know you're filled with good ideas and good taste. Otherwise, you would not be here. If you haven't already, of course, don't forget to join the Brat Pack by subscribing and ringing that bell so that we can hang out all the time, because I would love to do that. Bowz wants to hang out with you as well. Obviously, right now, do you see this little face? Can you say no to it? Can you? Because I never can. Look at it. It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. And if you want to hang out more consistently, you can check down below. All my social media is linked there for your convenience. I have Instagram, Twitter, Facebook page, and a Facebook group. And I also have a link to my merch if you are so interested. We have 2 designs right now, and I'm thinking of expanding that because you guys seem to be really enjoying it. And, oh, I also list all the makeup I use down below, the nail polish. All this is linked down below in case you want it, because it's pretty. Look at this. I can't deal with it. These earrings, I'm so sorry, I'm gonna let you know now, the store that makes them closed down. They're my only Christmas earrings, and it is December, so I just wanted to be festive with you. But everything else, everything that's available will be linked down below for your convenience. Of course, I just want to say one last thank you to Dossier for sponsoring this video. You are tight. I love working with Dossier. You guys know that. It's been like several months now, and we keep hanging out together, and I love it. And I want to thank you guys for always being so supportive of my channel and all my sponsors, because you're cool as hell. Yeah. And with all of that said, I just want to thank you for being here when you could literally be anywhere else in the world. That is tight. You are tight. Bows is tight. Right here. I don't know if you can see him. Please stay safe and be a better person than you were yesterday, and I hope to see you in my next video. Bye.